We have never wanted more from relationships, from our long-term intimate relationships, than we do right now. It is historically a brand new phenomenon. It's what my pal, how many of you know Esther Perel by any chance? It's what my pal Esther calls the grand ambition of love. You will be everything to me. You know, what we used to get met by an entire village, we now expect to get met by one person for the rest of our life. Where we used to marry in order to have sex, now we marry and only have sex with one person, most of us anyway. Things have changed, but have we really changed with them? I think what we want in our relationships is we want a spiritual connection, we want aliveness, we want passion. Essentially what we want is a long-term lover relationship for the rest of our lives. We've taken how many of you are married? Oh, quite a few, okay. To the person you're with? Anyway. We've taken the stability of a long-term marriage and we've grafted onto it the passion and connection and intimacy of a romance, of a lifelong romance. And the problem is that we just don't teach our sons and daughters in this culture, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. We don't give our sons and daughters the skills that they need. We haven't been given the skills that we need that are sophisticated enough to match this new sophisticated ambition. We don't teach kids how to fight fair. We don't teach kids how to speak up for themselves. We don't teach anybody how to listen and put yourself aside and really be there for your partner. This is all stuff you pick up along the way, or you don't. Why don't we teach these things? I would like to have relationship skills taught in elementary school, junior high, high school, and college. I'd like our kids to know about as much about how to have a relationship as they would about their own physical health or social well-being. Yeah, I'll take that. Now, I'll tell you why we don't teach our kids this. I mean, you may. In our own little nuclear families, you try. But as a culture, why we don't? Because we don't live in a relationship-cherishing culture. I'm sorry to have to tell you this. But we all live to this day under the rule of patriarchy. Patriarchy is the larger system. Patriarchy is the water, and we are the fish that swim in it. Now, I don't know. I've been talking about and writing about and arguing against patriarchy for 35 years now. And it's really interesting. When Obama and Michelle were in 8-9 years ago, you talked about patriarchy and half the audience would fall asleep. And you'd say feminism and half the audience would walk out the door. But something happened in 2016. I'm not going to say what exactly. But all of a sudden, the idea that we live in a post-patriarchal world and that all of that stuff is behind us is no longer real. And all of a sudden, the issue of looking at power, dominance, aggression, irresponsibility, masculinity, and traditional femininity, all of a sudden, these things are really, really important to each of us and to all of us as a culture. What we do with intimacy under patriarchy is what we do with many things deemed feminine under patriarchy. And let's be clear. Patriarchy is essentially a binary. There's a split. Half of human qualities we call feminine, half of human qualities we call masculine. Is everybody clear about this? Everybody knows which side is which and what goes where. Are we clear? Okay. The other part of patriarchy is, first is the binary, and then there's the hierarchy. Give me some masculine qualities. Somebody. Strong. Huh? Independent. Brave. Okay, here's some words that don't come up when I ask about masculine qualities. You ready? Love. I never hear love when I ask somebody to talk about men, or connection, or vulnerability, or yearning. It's strength, independence. It's all those things. And the feminine side, what's on there? Nurture. You can stop right there. Nurture, 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 and more nurture. Sensitivity, emotionality, vulnerability, dependency. These qualities cut both ways. Now, are these qualities held as separate but equal? In the traditional setup, they are not. Masculine qualities are exalted, feminine qualities are devalued. I call this the dance of contempt. The thing that I have to tell you, both men and women, gay and straight and lesbian and trans and all the rest, you cannot be faithful to the model that you were raised in and be intimate at the same time. In other words, the traditional gender roles of men and women are not built for intimacy. They're built for production and consumption and stability. Intimacy is a new demand, and a great one. The second thing I want to say, and this may be a little bit different for you guys out here in California, but when I say that we historically want an intimate relationship, a long life love relationship for the first time, long walks on the beach, holding hands, heart-to-heart talks, great sex in our 60s, 70s, and beyond. When I say we, do I mean both men and women equally? Maybe in this group, because you're an enlightened group. But out there in the world where I talk most often, the push for a more intimate relationship is coming primarily from women. Here's what I am, for those of you who don't know me. In 1997, I published a book called I Don't Want to Talk About It. It's a great thing to do at a cocktail party. Oh, you published a book? I don't want to talk about it. Anyway, it was the first book ever written about male depression. Depression had been seen as a woman's disease until that book came out. And I'm very proud of my part in putting male depression on the map. I began to get calls, because there's a lot of clinical stories in the book, from California. I'm from Boston. From California to New York, wherever. Do you have somebody who does the kind of work that you do? And now I do. We have a training institute and we have therapists we've trained. Where's Bonnie? Bonnie, stand up. Bonnie is a trained relational life therapist from LA who came here. So we have therapists around the country, but back then I couldn't say that. And so what I began to say after a while was, hey, look, if you're desperate enough and crazy enough, come to Boston and we'll work together. And people started flying in to see me, couples on the brink of divorce. These are all couples that no other therapist had been able to help. And this was the last stop. I called it a relational intervention. And in this relational intervention, we spent 2 days, the three of us, face to face, 2 whole days. At the end of the 2 days, the three of us would decide together, you're back on track or you're getting a divorce. That's it. This is the last stop. And I had a pretty good track record of saving the couples. And the thing that I noticed about that is, by the way, I broke most of the rules that I learned about couples therapy in these interventions. For you therapists, let me see the therapists in the room. How many of you learn in your therapy practice and training, when you're dealing with a couple, the cardinal rule is thou shalt not take sides? If you quote unquote lose your neutrality and side with one partner and say you're right, you're not so right, then you have to go to your supervisor and talk for a while about your mother. Then you regain your neutrality and you're back in the work that I do, we take sides. We side with the underprivileged one. We side with the underpowered one. I have a saying, in relationships, I want the weak to stand up, I want the mighty to melt. And here's the thing. How many of you ever heard you can't love somebody until you learn how to love yourself? Let me see hands. How many of you heard that? Can I ask you guys a question? What the hell does that mean? I mean, really, what does that mean? I'll tell you what it means. When we first talking, what I am about here, let me be clear about what I'm about, and then I'll go back to what that means, loving yourself. In the words of the great Harvey Milk, I am here today to recruit you. I am here to invite you to live a deeply relational life instead of a linear patriarchal life. A linear patriarchal life is a lot what we've been living. And a truly relational life is something that has to be cultivated and practiced and learned. What do I mean by a truly relational life? I mean that you exist in a state of authentic connection, loving connection to yourself and to others. A state of authentic, loving connection to yourself and to others. So let's start with your relationship to yourself. Let me ask you this. How many of you here give yourselves a hard time when you screw up? I mean like a seriously hard time. How many of you give yourselves a hard time? Yeah. Hold your hands up for a second. Everybody hold your hands up who's got that. Take a look around. Let's talk about self-esteem in this culture. Every time you are engaged in aggressive, negative self-talk, you are in a shame state. You are in a self-esteem failure. What is healthy self-esteem? Which is rare in this culture and which I usually have to teach people. Healthy self-esteem, and I owe this to one of my great mentors, Pia Mellody. How many of you know Pia? Pia Mellody's work? Okay. Healthy self-esteem is your capacity to hold yourself lovingly in the face of your screw-ups and imperfections. Let me say that again. It's the capacity to hold the way you do with a child who screws up. It's your capacity to hold yourself warmly and tenderly in the face of your screw-ups and imperfections as a human being. How many of us have that? I teach it. There's a two-step process, and I'm determined to give you guys practical skills as well as abstract information. There's a two-step process of working with negative self-talk that I use. The first is you lean into that immature part of you that is giving you a hard time. And the first thing you recognize is it's you. It's an immature part of you. We call it the adaptive child part of you. Look, we tend to hold ourselves the way we were held. If you were held indulgently, you'll indulge. If you were held harshly, you'll be harsh. We recreate the relationship with ourselves that we had growing up. So loving yourself in the face of your screw-ups and imperfections is an art. It's a practice. It's like building a muscle. It's like a mindfulness practice. You have to do it. You don't think about it. You do it. I'll tell you a story. May I tell you a story? I like stories. I'll tell you a story to illustrate this. I was giving a talk like this, much bigger therapy audience, a few hundred people. And I was late, and the person making my arrangements and stuff, looking after me, said, I was signing books, and the person said, Terry, you're going to miss your plane. I went, oh my God, and I gathered up everything, and we whisked off. I'm on the plane. I got my shoes off. I got a nice glass of Chardonnay. I'm feeling great about the day. And I feel this cold splotch on my shirt. True story. And I look down, and there's this black puddle of ink all over my shirt. I've been signing with a Sharpie, and I put it back in the shirt without a lid. And the whole thing was... And not only that, but this was one of my, I hope I get on Oprah, I'm going on TV shirts. This was like a several $100... Now look, I've got ADD, and I'm always breaking things, losing things, ruining things. Ask my wife. And I'm also depressive. I've been struggling with depression ever since I've been a little boy. Now, I want to tell you, when I look down at that shirt, back in the day, before I was in recovery, which I consider myself as being, and when I say recovery, I mean relational recovery, not an addiction recovery. I mean recovering that state of secure attachment, of relatedness, that is our birthright. Anyway, I feel like I'm in pretty good recovery now, but I knew I was, because formerly, if I looked down at that splotch, that could have triggered a 5-day depression. Literally. And what would it be? It would be me beating up me. When you listen to a depressed man or woman, what you're listening to is one part of the person beating up another part of the person. It's violent. It's internalized violence, emotional violence. And what I say to you, those of you who give yourselves a hard time, like me, is this. And you got to ask yourself, would I put up with somebody external talking to me like this? Would I put up with a friend or a partner saying these things to me? I would not. I would tell them to pipe down. But because it's me saying these things to me, I feel helpless. Well, I want you to push back. And so what I said to that adaptive child part of me, little Terry, little harsh Terry, who was giving me such a hard time, I said, hey, listen, let's be clear, okay? The same ADD brain that ruined this shirt is the brain that wrote the book that was being autographed. So why don't you pipe down? And it did. And when I have people begin to intervene on the way they talk to themselves, the way they relate to themselves, replace harsh transactions with more loving transactions, deliberately, consciously, and better at it as they do it. It's a revolution.